last for that will last for all the springs and the beginning of the summer. And today, Emanuele Quaranta will talk about sustainable hydropower in the European Union. Emanuele Quaranta is a scientific officer at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission in the Ocean and Water Unit. He holds a PhD from Politecnico di Torino, where he won a prize for the best PhD thesis on water engineering in Italy and the Quality Award by the university. His research field is water energy through the ecosystem nexus, focusing especially on hydropower technology and its interference with the environment, wastewater, and nature-based solutions. He is the responsible of the hydropower section of the Clean Energy Technology Observatory. With this research, he also supports policy strategies for the European Union, collaborating with several institutions and agencies. And he is also very active in technology development and innovations in the water energy field, collaborating with international companies and research centers. His dynamism has been awarded in 2022 when he was included among the top 2% scientists in the world. So thank you, Emanuele, for presenting today.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you. I would like to thank a lot all the board of the Italian Young Professional Network of the International Association for Hydroenvironmental Research. So I can start to share my screen. I also invite all the attending people to write in the chat their affiliation, if they, so that we can understand the variety of people who are in this meeting. Okay. Can you see the slide?
Yes, just
okay.
yeah,
Yes.
there is the top box. If you can, yeah, exactly. If you can put it a bit, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, we can see.
Okay, today we talk about sustainable hydropower in the European Union. Okay, here a brief summary of what we talk about today. I will show to you as hydropower is a very complex system, and due to its complexity, it is at the center of an important policy debate. Then I will show to you which is the European situation and some sustainable opportunities for the future. Hydropower is a complex system because when we talk about hydropower, we talk about water, hydrology, hydraulics, but we talk also about aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. We talk about impacts and benefit on the environment and on society, on geology, rock mechanics, but also we dealt with civil, mechanical, and structural engineering. When we talk about hydropower, we also to consider energy, electricity, and the hybridization of hydropower with other energy sources. But there are a plethora of other sectors involved in the hydropower one. For example, finance, infrastructure, multiple purposes reservoirs, grid flexibility, or the interference of hydropower with the ocean and atmosphere. So you can understand that when we talk about hydropower, we talk about a lot of different sectors. Just a terminology that I will use today, because maybe not all of you are familiar with the hydropower sector. Today I will also talk about pumped hydropower storage. Pumped hydropower storage are a power plant composed of two reservoirs. When we need to produce electricity, the waters flow from the upper reservoir to the lower reservoirs, generating electricity. Instead, when we have to consume electricity, maybe because the electricity production from wind and solar is too high, we have to consume electricity, and so we pump water from the lower reservoir to the upper reservoir. Hydropower interacts a lot with the environment and with the hydrosphere. For example, impacting on fish, on sediments, but it can also generate benefit. For example, can generate microclimate context, which can be very useful for the proliferation of new species and plants. Hydropower interacts a lot also with the ocean, because by interfering with fish migration, but also with sediments, can generate problems and impact. But on the other hand, hydropower also contributes to clean rivers, because a lot of plastic that is not attributable to hydropower is trapped inside reservoir and can be removed. Pumped hydropower storage can also be used in ocean context, and the lower reservoir can be the ocean. A lot of hydropower technologies can also be used in the oceans to generate electricity, for example, from waves, currents, and tidals. So from these slides, you can understand how hydropower interfere a lot and can be also exploitable in the ocean context. Then, in general, water reservoirs, so also including hydropower reservoirs, generate a lot of evaporation, but also greenhouse gas emissions, and this will interfere with atmosphere. Hydropower obviously interact also with the society, generating benefits, so renewable energy, tourism, but also impacts. For example, large reservoirs in the past have submerged villages in the mountains. Hydropower can be hybridized with other renewable energy sources, for example, with floating photovoltaics or photovoltaics on the dams with wind turbines. Hydropower can be integrated with batteries, but also the heat can be extracted from the generator and provide heat for warming, for example, the powerhouse or the buildings. So hydropower is at the center of the water energy food ecosystem nexus, together with its impact, but also benefit. Indeed, on one hand, we have a lot of benefit generated by hydropower, for example, renewable energy generation, energy storage, flexibility, a better water management, tourism around reservoirs. But on the other hand, hydropower can also impact a lot ecosystem, especially fish, sediments, can create river fragmentation. So from this debate, several questions arise. So is really hydropower sustainable and clean? Are more important the benefit or the impacts? And then, are you sure that the other renewable energy sources are less impacting on the environment? Because now I am perceiving that a lot of people talk about the impacts of hydropower, but overlook and neglect all the impacts associated, for example, to solar photovoltaics and also on the other energy sources. And this is wrong, because all the energy sources should be considered both in terms of impact and also in terms of benefit. For example, you can see in these slides a comparison among different energy sources, considering different indicators. In the first picture, you can see the impact of energy technologies on climate changes. You can see that hydropower impacts to a less extent on climate change, while, for example, biogas, gas, coal, fuel, but also solar PV impacts a lot. Here you can see another indicator, which is the ozone layer destruction. Again, hydropower is the less impacting, while there are other renewable energy sources that impacts more. If we look at the energy return on the investment, hydropower is the best, while, for example, solar, geothermal, and gas are the worst. If we look furthermore at the critical materials used for the construction of energy technologies, gas and hydropower are the less impacting. Instead, wind and solar are the most impacting. So with these slides, I don't want to encourage the use of hydropower and discourage the use of other energy sources, but just to highlight that any energy sources has its impact and its benefit. They should be considered comprehensively. So, due to this controversy between impacts and benefit, there is a policy debate around hydropower. Because on one hand, we have the impacts, for example, on fish, on the ecological status of rivers, and indeed, hydropower is perceived as a source of impact in the Water Framework Directive. On the other hand, we have the Renewable Energy Directive, where hydropower is perceived as a clean energy technology. Then there are other directives in the European Union, for example, the Flood Directive, where hydropower can generate both benefit thanks to its storage capacity, but also impact because interfere with the river flow. And this debate has generated, I would say, controversial binary views, because on one hand, we have people typically more careful on the environment that would like to stop hydropower a priori. On the other hand, we have energy stakeholder, hydropower stakeholder that would like to build hydropower everywhere. And this is not correct because we have to find the right and the optimal compromise. So some examples of binary views are the following ones. For example, a lot of people claim hydropower barriers are the main responsible of river fragmentation. I would say, yes, hydropower contributes to river fragmentation, but only 5% of barriers in European rivers are for hydropower. So the problem is not strictly associated to the hydropower. Yes, hydropower contributes, but to a less extent. Another example, on the other hand, is this. A lot of people say hydropower does not consume fuel, so it is clean. I will say, yes, I agree, but we have to consider that some reservoirs, especially in tropical climates, emit carbon and methane from the decomposition of organic matter, so can contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions. So you can understand that often these binary views are of limited perspective, and so we need to overcome their limitation by building sustainable hydropower. And sustainable hydropower is the achievement of a compromise, of a balance between electricity generation, benefit on society, and impacts on the ecosystem. So we have to incentivize and develop mitigation solutions and innovative technologies to reach this compromise. So some examples of sustainable hydropower where the compromise between impacts and benefit can be achieved are listed in these slides, where I did a lot of assessment at the European scale to assess the sustainable hydropower potential option. For example, one option could be the modernization of the existing hydropower plants, not only to increase energy generation, but also to mitigate impacts and to increase resilience to climate changes and to increase flexibility. Then we can tap hydropower in water mills or in existing barriers that cannot be removed. We can develop hydrokinetic turbines in rivers, although the potential of hydrokinetic turbines is limited. We can develop hydropower in existing water distribution network and wastewater treatment plants. We can recover heat from the generator or also install floating photovoltaics on hydropower reservoirs. It is possible also to interconnect existing reservoirs to create pumped hydropower storage. Furthermore, we can power and install new hydropower plants in existing dams. So there is a lot of potential of developing sustainable hydropower without harming the environment. So here you can see some key references with some assessment at the European scale of the potential of sustainable hydropower. And some conclusions: hydropower is a complex sector. It needs of more interaction and different kind of expertise. So please do not hold a priori position, do not hold a binary view, so yes or no, but try always to objectively and critically compare hydropower with the other options. Then we have also to say that the European Union is hydropower leader in scientific terms, but also under the industrial and innovation point of view. And the hydropower debate, especially in the policy context, has been the main driver of the knowledge and expertise development of the hydropower sector. So thank you for your attention. Now, 1 second, I try to stop the share of the screen. Okay. So now I open the discussion. If some of you have some question, can ask. Thank you. I can already look at the chat if there are some questions.
Yeah, I would break the ice.
Yeah.
So really nice presentation. Thank you a lot. And I've got a question for you. So indeed, in our country, I mean, talking about Italy, hydropower represents one of the first sources of renewable energy. But my question is, what are briefly the main challenges to even increase the share of hydropower concerning Italy?
Yeah, I think that the main challenge in Italy, but it is the same challenge in analogous context, so typically in all the European Union, is this debate. Because on one hand, we have that hydropower can generate a lot of benefit, and its flexibility is very useful because it allows to integrate the variable renewable energy from other sources, like for example from wind and solar, that are higher variable. And so they need hydropower, they need storage capacity to compensate the variability. So we need hydropower. We also need more water reservoirs to cope with climate changes in the future. But on the other hand, we generate a lot of impact while constructing hydropower reservoirs because we impact the rivers. So the main challenges are to develop these sustainable solutions. And so also to share knowledge about this sustainable potential and also be objective. For example, as I showed in the slides, very fast because there was not so much time, but just to give the concept, there are some technologies like, for example, hydrokinetic turbines that are, I will say, with a zero impact, not impact, but their potential is irrelevant. For example, there are other strategies, for example, the modernization of the existing hydropower plant that could improve hydropower generation by 10% without adding impact on the environment. So we have to be able also to set up the right priorities. And in Italy, I would say, for example, one priority is the modernization of the existing hydropower plants. Thank you.
Thanks.
I invite all of you, yes, to write in the chat your affiliation so we can, and can keep track.
Hi, Emanuele,
Yes,
thank you.
yeah.
And just have a quick question. I found very interesting what you say about the fact that reservoirs for hydropower production can also collect plastics. And I was wondering if there are cases where there are examples of active plastic removal from rivers in Europe. I mean, there are places where this is actually a place where authorities look for removing plastics.
Yes, there are some examples. I know, for example, the Danube River, where thousands of tons of plastic per year are removed from hydropower plants. And now I don't remember exactly the numbers, but I can send to you later. I have just to look for the reference that I have, but I don't have it in my mind now, but I will send to you. But yes, there are some case studies on plastic removal from the trash rack of hydropower plants, together with sediment.
We've got one question in the chat and also one raised hand. So maybe you can assess first the one in the chat.
So one question is how to modernize these plants in the face of climate change. Yes, we can modernize with novel technologies, for example, with new and more flexible turbines that can also allow to turbine lower flows. So following the consequence of climate changes, where, for example, in the south of Europe, there will be a lack of water, by installing these more flexible turbines, we can also use lower flows. In the north of Europe, where climate change will increase water availability, we can increase the efficiency of the turbine, install bigger turbines to discharge also this surplus of water availability. Another question I see there. How do you think we shall manage the trade-off between electricity production and other water uses, for example, irrigation? Yes, indeed, these uses are quite conflicting, but we have to consider that water that is used after hydropower operation can be used for irrigation. And so hydropower, in certain cases, does not subtract water from irrigation. Obviously, it depends, because if we subtract water in a catchment where we are also irrigating, we have to choose. But if the hydropower plant is upstream of the irrigation field, we can, in any case, use water for hydropower and then let the water for irrigation. But in any case, for example, in multiple use reservoirs, where we cannot do all these uses together, we have to choose. And obviously, irrigation is a higher priority with respect to hydropower. So we have to give priority to irrigation and then hydropower when it is not possible to do them simultaneously.
There is a raised hand from Matteo.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. So actually, my question is somehow related with the last two you just answered, but is more about the ecological impact of dams. So my question is there like an ongoing debate, or maybe I just simply don't know already, like an implementation in the policy of the so-called functional flow from dams? So flow that can somehow meet the hydrothermal requirements of freshwater community to a European level, at least. Yeah, that's my question. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. At the European level, now there is the Water Framework Directive that set up some guidelines to calculate the ecological flow to be released downstream in order to achieve the good ecological potential of rivers. And among these values, also the temperature is very important, because ecosystem relies on the water temperature. There are some cases not only of hydro peaking from hydropower plants. Hydro peaking is the rapid change of water flow due to the hydropower plants. But there are also cases of thermo peaking, where the temperature change along the river due to hydropower operation. Thermo peaking sometimes can generate impact, but sometimes also benefit, because the inflow to the turbines is drawn from the, I will say, the deep zone of the reservoir, where the water temperature is constant. And this means that there are case studies where in winter, the temperature of the flow is warmer, while in the summer, the temperature is colder. So globally, overall, across the year, the temperature is mild, and this can facilitate also the life of microorganisms and ecosystems. So even if in this case there can be impact, but there could be also benefit depending on the context. And this should be considered.
Are there other questions?
Well, actually, yes, if I may, I'll also turn my camera on. Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question which is not really technical, rather political. I don't know if there is an answer, but I'll try. I don't know if you're familiar with the SET plan, and I was wondering, first of all, why hydropower was not included in the SET plan in the first place. And then if you think, Emanuele, since this year will be revamped, if you think that there will be more relevance to it, or if it will be at least mentioned in it, and if you know about the status of the art of the process.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm not fully aware of all such plans, but yes, I know that now politically, but also technically, hydropower has a lot of controversies between impacts and benefit. And now a lot of attention has been paid on the growth of other renewable, like, for example, hydrogen in the European Union, wind, and solar. And yes, hydropower is a little bit placed in the corner. So I understand this, but I think that hydropower gradually will start again to reappear because we are understanding its importance in the flexible electricity market. So now, yes, I must admit that I'm not fully in the process of the SETS plan, so I cannot give to you a precise answer, but so I can give to you my feeling of this. And yes, my feeling also is this, that hydropower is a little bit in the corner, but gradually will grow up its importance in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, because if we incentivize a lot wind and solar, we have also to increase our storage capacity of energy. And we can do this by also batteries, but batteries are still at the beginning, are not still mature and need a lot of critical material. The most efficient option is by pumped hydropower storage. So hydropower will be important for the renewable energy target of the European Union in the future. But the prediction says, I not remember exactly the value, but it is estimated more or less from the European Commission that the electricity generation increase by hydropower needed in the future will be more or less between 30 and 60 terawatt hours per year, while the pumped hydropower capacity need to double, more or less, to reach more or less 70 gigawatt of installed capacity. So yes, hydropower is not completely forgotten.
Emanuele, there is one more question in the chat, then we will have to close the meeting. So, but we have time to assess this question.
For the sediments in the storage, in terms of management, do we just assume it is inusable material, or is there a case where we look at the sediment as something that has value? Yeah, this is an interesting question because sediments in reservoirs are sediments coming from rivers that can be used. So is a sediment that can be used for construction, for example, or that can be located downstream to supply the sediments that has been trapped. So typically what is done in hydropower reservoirs is to buy some operational strategies to restore the sediment continuity. So this sediment is drawn from the reservoirs and then put downstream, but can also be used for construction. Now, I don't know exactly specific case studies, but yes, this is an option that can be done. And I know that it's done. I don't know exactly the case studies, but yes. Also because typically an average cost of dredging sediments from the reservoirs more or less ranged between 10 to 20 euros per cubic meter of sediments. So it is a value and the cost.
Okay, grazie. Sorry, thank you, Emanuele, for your presentation and for answering all our questions. And thank you for all the participants to this first webinar. And I invite you for our next meeting that will be on Tuesday, 21 March at 2 p.m. online. And in the following meeting, Simone Pagliara from IAHR Zurich will talk about high energy air water flows in hydraulic structures. So thank you and see you next time.